Hello, I'm John August. I'm with the Pirate branch of Fusion and stood for Bennelong at the last election. And I'm here with Brendan Clark, who's with the Science branch of Fusion. And I think you stood for which seat at the last election?
Berowra.
Berowra, stood for the seat of Berowra at the last election. Now, what we're going to be talking about is the thing that's come up, which is charging for cars, in particular electric vehicles is one that's come in the sights. But we're going to be talking about some of the economic perspectives. This is particularly coming from John Quiggin, who's an economist in in Queensland. And I should point out we're actually recording in Hornsby Library, that's correct. And so yes, you will get people wandering past, so hopefully that won't be too distracting. But and anyway, I suppose one of the things that John Quiggin is saying is that really we should be paying for the impacts of our car travel, and I guess also paying to keep the roads going. But one of the things about electric vehicles is they actually generate less pollution, and that is a cost to all of us that comes from regular cars. So I know, Brendan, you've had some children, and one of the issues that has come up is picking up and dropping off children at schools, and they've sort of done any of the research in that. I think there's some impacts of pollution there.
Yeah, so there's particulates from the actual fuel. There's the brake dust, which can leach into their lungs, and then there's the hydrocarbons and the carbon monoxide, which can lead to disturbances in the children's concentration during the day.
Right, so I think there's also just generally traffic noise as well. So
yes, that's the other thing, is the traffic noise can lead to children's anxiety as well. So there's been a number of studies over in Scotland at the moment, where they're talking about, in some areas, banning cars from idling completely and then finding drivers, and then putting measures on to actually reduce the level of pickups.
Right, because I know that there is concern about that in Australia. And I mean, I have driven past schools where there's this long queue of vehicles, there waiting to pick up the children, and it is something of a concern. So we're not just talking about, I guess, carbon dioxide and that impact on the environment, which I guess we'll talk about briefly. But, my also other understanding is that in terms of, I think heart problems and lung problems and so on, you're actually more likely to have them close to main roads if you live close to a main road. So
that's right.
There are these, I guess, health impacts that are in the background, and, it would be nice to reduce them. So, let's say, yes, electric vehicles are running around and we can worry about whether they're covering the cost of the road, but they're certainly saving us all in terms of less pollution. That has direct health impacts, but it also is reducing the amount of carbon we're putting in the atmosphere as well. And certainly, I guess not everybody agrees, but we think we're on the same page and saying, look, that is a good thing to have happening there. But when it comes to the paying for the roads, I've got nothing against if we sort of have one set of charges to keep the roads going and then another bit of charge where you compensate people for the less pollution that they're making, if we actually put them all on the table at once. And I know there are researchers who do actually say, look, our fully laden semi-trailers are actually doing 10,000 times more damage to the road than one vehicle is. So I suppose it's sort of, I hope it's not too convenient sort of distraction and so on. I can only say I've long had this concern about these inequities in road use and how we're charging for them. And we certainly don't charge fully laden semi-trailers 10,000 times more than vehicles do. So I suppose you could say, look, if this is a concern, is the political view actually looking at it objectively? And I don't think so, but to be sure, it seems like a lot of our politics is about emotion and not reason, to be fair.
Yeah, well, it's like with the electric vehicles right now. So because I don't use petrol, the governments are now trying to slap charges onto electric vehicles, right? Because they're not paying the petrol tax, right? instead of actually doing a well-reasoned approach and looking at saying, well, we've got petrol-powered vehicles, we've got diesel-powered vehicles, we've got trucks, so we've got motorcycles, and we've got these electric cars, right? Why not redo the charges so that there's a charge across the board for the amount of damage, amount of pollution to the roads, etc., and actually be upfront and transparent about what that money is being used for, because a lot of it goes into consolidated revenue and doesn't go back into the roads.
Well, that's right. I mean, the idea that like there's these pots of money that flow around, and I suppose, look, I'm not just saying state government, but local government. It does seem like at so many levels, the government collects money based on one justification. But then when it's got that money, it doesn't actually spend it in the way it's been justified. Now look, maybe it's spending it in ways that are necessary and important and so on, but it does feel like there's a bit of bait and switch going on there. And that's part and parcel of what government does, not just here, but everywhere. And I think one thing I think I should point out, I am something of a cyclist, and while on the one hand, look, I am making these critiques of fully laden semi-trails and so on, but the one point to make as a cyclist is we do recognise the professionalism of drivers who are courteous to cycles on the road, and that's certainly more the case than, dare I say, I hope I won't upset too many people watching this, but people driving large four-wheel drives on suburban roads, they are much more of a concern to cyclist safety than are professional truck drivers. And on the one hand, look, I'm making this critique of large trucks, but please, your efforts as professional truck drivers are not lost. They are appreciated by a lot of people out there. So let me try to be balanced in the way that I critique things. So that is one of the things that is going on there, that we certainly do believe in having charges covered properly and have them done in a reasoned way, in an evidence-based way, and certainly that's what I think we are both thinking in favour of. So certainly John Quiggin in Queensland is an economist there. He's done the analysis there, and I guess I'm sort of rehashing a lot of the points that he's making. But there are also groups in Australia who are concerned about idling cars, picking up children, and that does have very real health effects. But I suppose we can also say that I know electric cars, it is something somewhat controversial about what is the environmental impact in return for the carbon reduction we have. But one of the things I do know of at least one person who is taking batteries out of wrecked electric vehicles and repurposing them as like batteries for a household. So rather than just thinking of, here is a battery in a car that just gets used for a certain amount of time and then thrown out, well, that is not the case. In so many cases, they can be repurposed, and that sort of reuse or downcycling, you might say, to get extra use out of the investment we've made in the car is sort of helping things along.
Yes, there's a little bit of controversy around that, because a lot of people who are skeptics of electric vehicles say that once your battery is no longer useful in a car, it's just rubbish, right? However, just because it's no longer useful in an electric vehicle doesn't mean it's not useful in large battery packs used for household batteries and other storage. Those batteries are often still good. They're just not as good in things like electric vehicles, because electric vehicles need high amounts of charge, and they also need the weight.
Yeah.
When you actually have a household battery or something like that, you don't have the weight considerations because it's sitting on the ground, it's not moving, and those batteries are still useful for a number of years after that. So it's mainly not useful for electric vehicles, but it then becomes recycled into some other household battery pack or something like that.
I would say partially it's, I guess, the result of the external critique, that a lot of electric vehicles are now being designed for reuse and recycling and so on. And I think I have to say I speak from personal experience. The regulations we have about cars that are wrecked, and the difficulties in terms of bringing them back from the dead and back to life and on the roads. I mean, you could say that there's the environmental possibility of, I guess, bringing a car back from the dead, and which is a wonderful thing. And then at times you do have your government regulations that are getting in the way of like what are quite positive possibilities, and you know that is its whole other tangent. You know, we have the right to repair and other such issues which I won't go into here, but certainly I've spoken about them elsewhere.
Sure.
But Brendan, I suppose maybe we'll bring things to a close. But anything more you want to add to the picture?
Oh, just about there. There's a Melbourne project at the moment where they're actually turning some of the school buses into electric buses now, and that's basically to decrease the level of pollution outside of schools as well.
Right. Okay.
One of the misconceptions of people who don't like electric vehicles is that they think they still produce pollution because obviously in the manufacturing of the device, right? But what you don't think about is things like what happens when cars go through tunnels, right on the outside of schools. Electric vehicles don't produce any pollutions directly outside those areas. So they still produce pollution. Obviously, at the moment, you're still using coal power stations to charge them, plus the solar that's coming in. However, that's much more efficient than having a combustion engine sitting outside of a school. And electric vehicles, they still have brake pads inside them, but they're 70 to 80% less pollution or brake dust particles, which can enter the lungs and cause asthma and other respiratory illnesses, than a petrol powered vehicle.
Well, there's so many stories that I'm aware of, but one of them is that with garbage trucks, they've converted them to electric, and they've got a major saving because with the garbage truck you're accelerating and decelerating so much. And if you're decelerating and charging your batteries rather than just wearing out your brake pads, you get quite a benefit from that. And you're talking about I guess in tunnels and so on. And I can still remember how we have actually had tunnels built in Sydney, and you've got these stacks because you've got to actually ventilate the tunnels. And those stacks and the fact that they need to be installed and you need to push so much air through them, and where do you have them and so on. It has been an item of quite some political controversy in Sydney. So certainly there are tunnels, but whenever there are tunnels with petrol cars going through them, you need to deal with that, and that becomes quite a burden of making these tunnels operate effectively.
Yeah, so if you can get, once they bring out, reasonable electric trucks and things like that, then you're going to get much more cleaner tunnels, much cleaner air, the people living around those tunnels. One big problem with the M5 tunnel when that's first built is they didn't anticipate the angles of the actual tunnel, right? And so during certain weather conditions, the trucks would drive through there, but there was so much pollution inside the tunnel that the truck engines couldn't get enough oxygen. And so the trucks used to struggle, which produced more pollution in those tunnels, and that was causing a lot of respiratory illness. So they had to pump more air through those things, right? So this pollution thing is still a very, very severe issue, and obviously outside of schools, because children are young, their lungs are still developing, they're much more susceptible to that pollution damage. Going to electrification of vehicles is actually going to save those third and second order consequences.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, thanks for that, Brendan. I think unless you've got more to say, we might bring things to a close.
No, thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you to you watching. I hope you found this an interesting discussion. Thank you.